The morning sun peeked through the massive windows of the Harrington Hotel lobby, casting golden rectangles across the polished marble floor. Zora Williams adjusted her crisp black uniform and tried to calm her nerves. 3 weeks into her new job as a housekeeper at one of Chicago's most prestigious hotels, and she still felt like she might get lost in the sprawling building with its 12 floors and over 200 rooms. Back home in Greenwood, Mississippi, everybody knew everybody. The small town where Zora had spent her first 28 years of life couldn't have been more different from the bustling city she now called home, but when her mother got sick last year, the medical bills started piling up. The job at the corner store wasn't cutting it anymore. Her cousin Darlene, who'd moved to Chicago 5 years earlier, told her about openings at the hotel where she worked in the laundry department. "Girl, the tips alone are worth it," Darlene had said over the phone. "And they got health insurance too." That was all Zora needed to hear. She packed up her 2 suitcases, hugged her mama goodbye, and boarded a Greyhound bus headed north. Now, as she pushed her cleaning cart down the plush hallway of the 7th floor, Zora went through her mental checklist of do's and don'ts that Mrs. Pearson, the head of housekeeping, had drilled into all new staff. Never make eye contact with the guests unless they speak to you first, Mrs. Pearson had instructed during training, her thin lips barely moving as she spoke. You provide invisible service. That means they enjoy the results of your work without having to acknowledge your existence. The older woman had given Zora a look that suggested she might be particularly visible. Zora had pretended not to notice. She stopped her cart outside room 712 and knocked gently. "Housekeeping," she called softly, waiting a few moments before using her key card. The room was a disaster. Clothes strewn everywhere, empty room service trays on every surface, and the distinct smell of expensive cologne mixed with last night's whiskey hanging in the air. Zora sighed. The businessman who had checked in 3 days ago had left the "Do Not Disturb" sign on his door until this morning. Now she understood why. Working methodically, Zora stripped the bed, gathered the towels from the bathroom floor, and began restoring order to the chaos. She'd gotten faster over the past weeks, learning little tricks to cut down her time in each room while still meeting Mrs. Pearson's exacting standards. "You missed a spot," a voice had said during her first week, causing Zora to jump and nearly knock over a crystal lamp on the nightstand. Mrs. Pearson had materialized in the doorway, her hawk-like eyes scanning the room for imperfections. The baseboards behind the chair. Dust them again. Today, Zora made sure to check all the baseboards, under the beds, and behind the furniture. She wasn't going to give Mrs. Pearson any reason to single her out again. By lunchtime, Zora had finished her assigned rooms on the 7th floor and headed to the staff break room in the basement. The hotel was a different world below ground. Concrete floors instead of marble, fluorescent lights instead of crystal chandeliers, and the constant hum of industrial washing machines from the laundry room down the hall. "How's it going upstairs?" Darlene asked as Zora dropped into the chair across from her. Her cousin pushed a container of leftovers toward her. "Same as yesterday," Zora replied, gratefully accepting the food. "Rich people being rich, making messes for us to clean up." "Any good tips?" Darlene wiggled her eyebrows. Zora shrugged. $20 from the lady in 721. She's staying all week for some art show. That's something at least. Better than Williams. Mrs. Pearson's sharp voice cut through the break room chatter. Conversations immediately died down as the supervisor made her way to their table. "You're being reassigned this afternoon." Zora felt her stomach twist. Reassignment usually meant someone had complained or worse, reported something missing from their room. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. "No problem. Terry called in sick, so you'll be covering the 12th floor." Mrs. Pearson handed her a new set of room assignments. "Make sure you follow the special instructions for room 1217. Zora nodded, scanning the paper. Next to room 1217, someone had written, "Minimal service, fresh towels only, do not disturb occupant." "That's the corner suite," Darlene whispered after Mrs. Pearson left. "The big one with the private balcony. What's so special about it?" Darlene leaned closer. "Some big shot stays there a lot. Been coming for months. Nobody knows much about him except he likes his privacy. Zora's lunch break ended too quickly, and soon she was pushing her cart into the service elevator headed for the 12th floor. The hallway carpet was thicker here, the wallpaper more elaborate, and the distance between doors greater, indicating larger rooms. She worked her way through the floor, noticing subtle differences in the luxury suites compared to the standard room she usually cleaned. Real flowers instead of artificial ones, higher quality coffee in the in-room machines, bath products that probably cost more than what she earned in an hour. When she reached room 1217, Zora hesitated. She checked her watch. 3:17 p.m. Most guests were out at this hour, especially on a Tuesday. She knocked softly. "Housekeeping," she called, quieter than usual, mindful of the instructions. No response. She knocked once more, then carefully opened the door with her key card, pushing it just enough to peek inside. "Hello?" "Housekeeping." The suite was immaculate. If not for the closed laptop on the desk and a book on the coffee table, she might have thought it was unoccupied. Unlike the other rooms she'd cleaned today, everything was in its place. The bed was nearly made, the towels hung neatly on the racks, and there wasn't a single personal item in sight except for a sleek leather duffel bag placed on the luggage rack. Zora stepped in quietly and went straight to the bathroom to replace the towels as instructed. As she was arranging them on the rack, she heard the main door to the suite open and close. Her heart jumped to her throat. The mysterious occupant had returned. She froze, remembering Mrs. Pearson's stern warning about disturbing the guest. Should she announce her presence or try to slip out unnoticed? Before she could decide, a deep voice called out from the living area of the suite. "Hello? Is someone here?" The voice was calm, not angry. Zora took a deep breath and stepped out of the bathroom. "I'm so sorry, sir," she said, keeping her eyes lowered as Mrs. Pearson had taught her. "I'm just replacing your towels. I'll be out of your way immediately." She finally looked up and saw a man about her age, maybe a few years older. He was tall, with dark skin a shade or two deeper than her own, dressed in a simple but clearly expensive navy blue sweater and tailored slacks. What struck her most were his eyes. They didn't hold the dismissive glance she'd grown accustomed to from guests. Instead, they showed something like surprise, followed by recognition. "You're new?" he said, not as an accusation but as an observation. "Yes, sir, just started a few weeks ago. I normally work on the 7th floor, but I'm covering for someone today." Zora was talking too much, a nervous habit she'd been trying to break. To her surprise, the man smiled. It transformed his serious face, creating a small dimple in his right cheek. "No problem, what's your name?" The question caught her off guard. Guests rarely asked for her name. "Zora, sir, Zora Williams." He nodded as if filing this information away. "Nice to meet you, Zora Williams. How are you finding Chicago so far?" Her eyes widened slightly. How did he know she wasn't from here? Seeing her confusion, he added, "Your accent, it's Southern, right?" "Mississippi," she admitted. "Is it that obvious?" "Only in certain words." His smile remained, warm and genuine. "I like it." An awkward silence fell between them, and Zora became acutely aware that she was still holding a stack of hand towels and standing in the middle of his suite. "I should let you get back to your day, sir. I didn't mean to disturb you." He waved, a hand dismissively. "You're not disturbing me at all." He walked over to the desk and closed his laptop. "Actually, I was about to head out myself." Zora nodded and quickly placed the remaining towels in the bathroom. When she emerged, the man was putting on a simple black jacket. "Have a good afternoon, sir," she said, heading for the door. "You too, Zora from Mississippi." There was something in the way he said it, not condescending but almost friendly, that made her pause for just a moment before leaving. Back in the hallway, Zora let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She'd been so worried about the mysterious guest in 1217, expecting some demanding, difficult person. Instead, he seemed normal, nice even. As she pushed her cart to the next room, she wondered who he was. Not a celebrity. She would have recognized anyone famous. Maybe a writer or a professor. He had that thoughtful, intelligent look about him. Or perhaps a businessman who preferred privacy to the flashier guests who paraded through the lobby with their entourages. Whatever his story, Zora had a feeling their paths would cross again. The thought didn't bother her as much as it probably should have. Zora's hands trembled as she unfolded the crisp, cream-colored note that had been slipped under her apartment door. The Harrington Hotel's gold emblem gleamed at the top of the heavy stationery, making her stomach tighten with worry. "Miss Williams," it read in neat handwriting. "Your presence is requested in the executive conference room tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please see Mrs. Pearson regarding coverage for your shift. Anthony Reynolds, General Manager." Zora sank onto her second-hand couch, the note still clutched in her fingers. In her 2 months at the hotel, she'd never been called to meet with management, let alone the general manager himself. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. "They're gonna fire me," she whispered to the empty apartment. But why? She racked her brain, replaying the past few weeks. Had she made a mistake she wasn't aware of? Had a guest complained? Was it because of her conversations with Mr. Harrington, Thomas Harrington, the man she now knew owned not just the hotel she worked in, but the entire Harrington hotel chain across the country? The revelation about his identity still stung with embarrassment when she thought about it. All those times she'd cleaned his suite, their brief conversations, even the incident when he'd stepped in to help her with that drunk guest, and she'd had no idea who he really was. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Zora tossed and turned, imagining worst-case scenarios. By morning, dark circles had formed under her eyes, which no amount of concealer could fully hide. "Girl, you look like you seen a ghost," Darlene said when Zora stopped by the laundry room on her way to the meeting. "What's going on?" "Meeting with management," Zora replied, showing her cousin the note. "Pretty sure I'm getting fired." Darlene's eyes widened. "What? Why would they fire you? Your work is good. Mrs. Pearson is strict as hell, but even she hasn't complained about you lately." "I don't know." Zora glanced at her watch. 20 minutes until the meeting. "Maybe it has something to do with Mr. Harrington." "The owner?" Darlene lowered her voice even though they were alone. "You think he complained about you?" Zora shook her head. "He's always been nice to me. But maybe I wasn't supposed to talk to him like I did. Maybe there's some rule I didn't know about." "That's ridiculous," Darlene scoffed, but her eyes held concern. "Look, whatever happens, you can stay with me until you find something else. You know that, right?" Zora nodded, grateful for her cousin's support. With a deep breath, she straightened her uniform and headed for the elevator. The executive conference room was on the mezzanine level, an area of the hotel Zora had only glimpsed from afar. The carpet was thicker here, the lighting softer, the artwork on the walls original rather than prints. She approached the heavy wooden door, took another steadying breath, and knocked. "Come in," a man's voice called. Zora opened the door and stepped inside. The conference room was smaller than she'd imagined, intimate almost, with a gleaming table that could seat about 12 people. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the Chicago skyline that would have taken her breath away under different circumstances. At the table sat two men. One was Anthony Reynolds, the general manager, whom she recognized from the staff orientation on her first day. He was in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and the permanently furrowed brow of someone who spent his days solving other people's problems. The other was Thomas Harrington, dressed in a simple but clearly expensive navy suit, looking more formal than she'd ever seen him in his suite. "Ms. Williams," Reynolds said, standing. "Thank you for joining us. Please have a seat." Zora sat across from them, her back straight, hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. "Am I in trouble, sir?" she asked, deciding to cut to the chase, rather than prolong her anxiety. Reynolds glanced at Thomas, who gave a small smile. "Not at all, Ms. Williams," Reynolds said, his tone professional but not unkind. Quite the opposite, in fact. Confusion replaced fear, and Zora looked between the two men. "I don't understand." Thomas leaned forward slightly. "Zora? May I call you Zora?" She nodded. "I've been watching you work for the past 2 months." That didn't sound good. Zora tensed again. Not in a creepy way, he added quickly, seeming to realize how his words had sounded. I mean, I've been observing all the staff, evaluating their performance, their attitude, their interactions with guests. It's something I do at all my properties. I stay as a guest, blend in, and see how things really run when people don't know the owner is watching. Like undercover boss, Zora said without thinking, then immediately regretted it. But Thomas laughed. Exactly like that, minus the TV cameras. Though I don't wear disguises or anything. Reynolds cleared his throat softly, as if to get the conversation back on track. Right, Thomas continued. The point is, I've been impressed by you, Zora. Your attention to detail, your work ethic, the way you treat every guest with the same level of respect and care, regardless of how they treat you in return. That's rare. Zora didn't know what to say. This was the last thing she'd expected when walking into this room. Thank you, sir, she managed. But what really caught my attention, Thomas went on, was how you handled the situation with Mr. Berkowitz last month. Zora remembered it well. A wealthy regular guest had been unnecessarily rude to one of the new housekeepers, a young immigrant from Guatemala who was still learning English. The girl had been in tears, and though it wasn't her floor or her responsibility, Zora had stepped in, calmed the guest down, fixed whatever imagined problem he'd been shouting about, and then spent her break teaching the new girl some English phrases that might help her in the future. You didn't know anyone was watching, Thomas said. You didn't do it for recognition or reward. You did it because it was the right thing to do. That's the kind of person we need in leadership positions at Harrington hotels. The word leadership hung in the air for a moment before Zora fully processed it. Sir? Reynolds slid a folder across the table toward her. We'd like to offer you a position in our management training program, Ms. Williams. Zora stared at the folder but didn't open it. I don't understand. I don't have a degree in hotel management. I've never been in a leadership role before. The EU program is designed to teach you everything you need to know, Reynolds explained. Though Zora noticed his smile didn't quite reach his eyes, was he not on board with this idea? It's intensive, 6 months of training rotating through every department in the hotel. And usually, Thomas added, it's reserved for people with at least a bachelor's degree in hospitality management or a related field. But I believe in making exceptions for exceptional people. Reynolds's tight smile confirmed Zora's suspicion that this wasn't his idea. Still, he continued professionally. The position comes with a significant salary increase, benefits, and a clear path to advancement within the company. Zora's mind raced. This was the kind of opportunity people dreamed about but rarely got, especially people like her, from small towns with no connections or fancy degrees. Why me? She asked softly, still not quite believing this was happening. Thomas met her eyes directly. Because you remind me of my grandfather. He started with nothing, faced discrimination at every turn, but never let it harden his heart or diminish his work ethic. He built this company from the ground up, one opportunity at a time. I believe in honoring his legacy by doing the same for others when I can. There was a moment of silence as Zora tried to process everything. Finally, she reached for the folder and opened it. Inside was a contract outlining the position, the training schedule, the compensation package, which was nearly 3 times what she currently made, and the expectations. This is a lot to take in, she said honestly. Of course, Thomas nodded. You don't have to decide right now. Take the contract home, read it carefully, and let us know your decision by the end of the week. But, Reynolds added, his tone carrying a warning, this offer must remain confidential until all the paperwork is finalized. We wouldn't want to create any tension among the staff. Zora understood the implication. Some people wouldn't be happy about her promotion, especially those who might feel they deserved it more due to seniority or education. I understand, she said. And thank you both for this opportunity. It means more than I can say. As she stood to leave, Thomas stood as well. My grandfather used to say that talent can be found anywhere, but opportunity is not distributed equally. Sometimes it's up to us to correct that imbalance when we can. Zora nodded, clutching the folder to her chest like it might disappear if she loosened her grip. "I won't let you down, sir." "I know you won't," Thomas replied with a confidence. Tch. It somehow made Zora believe it too. Outside the conference room, Zora leaned against the wall for a moment, letting the reality of what had just happened sink in. From housekeeper to management trainee in just 2 months. Wait until she told her mama back in Mississippi. Wait until she told Darlene. But as she made her way back downstairs, Reynolds's warning echoed in her mind. This had to remain a secret for now. She would have to continue her regular duties, act normal, and not give anyone reason to suspect her life was about to change, dramatically. When Darlene spotted her in the hallway and hurried over, eyes wide with concern and curiosity, Zora forced her face into an expression of relief. "Everything's fine," she said, trying to sound casual. "They just wanted my input on some new cleaning products they're considering for the rooms." "That's it?" Darlene looked skeptical. "All that worry for nothing?" Zora nodded, hating that she had to lie to her cousin but knowing it was necessary. For now. "Yep, all that worry for nothing." As she returned to her cart and continued her shift, Zora's mind was already racing ahead to what this opportunity could mean, not just for her but for her mama's medical bills, for her future, for all the doors that had always seemed firmly closed to someone like her. A few hours later, as she was changing the sheets in room 824, her phone buzzed with a text message. "Unknown number. Congratulations again. I meant what I said about my grandfather. This company was built on recognizing potential in unexpected places." Zora smiled, tucking the phone back into her pocket. For the first time since moving to Chicago, she felt like she truly belonged here. Like maybe, just maybe, this massive city with all its towering buildings and endless opportunities had a place for her after all. The weekend arrived at the Harrington Hotel with a flurry of activity that made Zora's head spin. A tech conference had booked nearly half the rooms, filling the lobby with people carrying laptop bags and speaking in jargon Zora couldn't begin to understand. The other half of the hotel housed a wedding party. Some famous doctor's daughter was getting married in the grand ballroom on Saturday night. All hands on deck, Mrs. Pearson had announced during the morning staff meeting, her thin lips pressed into an even thinner line than usual. No breaks longer than 15 minutes, no chit-chat in the hallways, and absolutely no mistakes. Her eyes had lingered on Zora when she said this last part, making Zora straighten her spine instinctively. Now, as she pushed her cart down the 12th floor hallway, Zora's feet already ached. She'd been at work since 6 in the morning, and it was only noon. The tech people had requested early check-ins, which meant rushing to prepare rooms ahead of schedule. The wedding guests had specific demands: extra pillows, champagne on ice, welcome baskets that needed to be arranged just so, and Mrs. Pearson was everywhere at once, materializing around corners to inspect Zora's work with critical eyes. "The bathroom amenities need to be arranged at perfect right angles," she'd said in room 1032, demonstrating with sharp, precise movements. "The Harrington standard is excellence in every detail." Zora had nodded, rearranging the tiny bottles of shampoo and lotion until they passed inspection. As she approached room 1217, the corner suite occupied by the mysterious man she now knew as Thomas, Zora slowed down. Their brief conversation from the other day still played in her mind. He'd been so normal, kind even. Not at all what she'd expected from someone staying in the hotel's most expensive suite. She checked her watch. 12:17 p.m. He was usually out at this time, often not returning until evening. Following protocol, she knocked softly on the door. "Housekeeping," she called. No answer. She knocked once more, then used her key card to enter. The suite was empty, as expected. Zora moved efficiently through the space, replacing towels, making the bed, and wiping down surfaces. As always, there wasn't much to clean. Thomas was unusually tidy for a hotel guest. She was just finishing up when something caught her eye. A leather-bound notebook on the desk, open to a page filled with handwriting. Zora quickly looked away. Reading guests' personal items was strictly against hotel policy and her own sense of right and wrong. But as she adjusted the desk chair, her eyes inadvertently fell on a phrase at the top of the page. Harrington Hotel, Chicago, staff. Observations. Zora froze. Was he some kind of inspector? A critic writing a review of the hotel? Her heart raced as she remembered their conversation, how he'd known she was new, how he'd asked about her experience in Chicago. Before she could process this, the door to the suite opened. Zora jumped back from the desk as Thomas walked in, dressed in casual clothes, jeans and a simple blue button-down shirt, so different from the suits she usually saw him in. His eyes widened slightly in surprise. Then recognition set in. "Zora from Mississippi," he said with that same warm smile from before. "We meet again." "I'm so sorry, sir," Zora said quickly, her voice higher than usual. "I was just finishing up. I didn't mean to disturb your privacy." He waved a dismissive hand. "Not at all. I just forgot my phone." He walked to the bedside table and picked up a sleek smartphone. "Big day down there, huh? The lobby's packed." "Yes, sir. Tech conference and a wedding this weekend." Thomas nodded, sliding the phone into his pocket. "I was hoping to avoid all that. Thought I'd work from a coffee shop today instead." An awkward silence fell between them. Zora felt like she should leave, but she couldn't shake the nagging question about the notebook. Was her job at risk? Were all the staff being evaluated? "Well, I should let you get back to your day," she said, moving toward her cart in the hallway. "Actually," Thomas said, stopping her, "I could use a local's recommendation. Where's a good coffee shop nearby? Somewhere quiet where I could work for a few hours?" Zora almost laughed. "I'm hardly a local, sir. I've only been in Chicago a month myself." "Still, more than me," he replied. "I've only been in town 2 weeks this trip." This trip? So he was a regular, just as Darlene had said. "There's a place called Grounded about 2 blocks east," Zora offered. "My cousin says they have good coffee and free Wi-Fi, not too crowded. On weekdays." "Perfect. Thank you, Zora." He grabbed a laptop bag from the closet and headed for the door. As he passed her, he added, "I like your honesty, by the way. Most people would have pretended to know all the best spots in town." With that, he was gone, leaving Zora standing in the suite with more questions than answers about the mysterious Thomas. By Saturday evening, Zora was dead on her feet. The wedding was in full swing in the ballroom, and the tech conference had scheduled an open bar event in the mezzanine lounge. The hotel was bursting at the seams with activity, every staff member running at full speed to keep things flowing smoothly. Zora had been reassigned to evening turn-down service on the 10th through 12th floors, a task usually reserved for senior housekeeping staff, but with everyone stretched thin, Mrs. Pearson had grudgingly given her the assignment. "Do not disturb the guests," she'd instructed sternly. "If they're in the room, simply apologize and move on to the next one. And remember, excellence in every detail." Zora had finished for her, earning a sharp look but also the tiniest nod of approval. Now, as she pushed a smaller cart containing chocolates for the pillows and fresh ice for the buckets, Zora tried to ignore her aching feet and back. Just a few more rooms and she could go home to her tiny apartment, soak in a hot bath and not think about hotel guests or proper towel folding techniques for at least 8 hours. She was on the 11th floor when she heard it. Raised voices, coming from the ice room. Pausing outside the door, Zora recognized the first voice as belonging to one of the wedding guests, a red-faced man who'd been getting progressively louder in the lobby bar earlier. "Come on, sweetheart, I'm just asking what time you get off work. That's a compliment." The second voice was quieter, with a Spanish accent. Luisa, one of the new housekeepers who'd started just after Zora. "Please, sir, I need to finish my work." "Excuse me. Don't be like that. Here, I'll make it worth your while." The slur in his words was unmistakable. Zora didn't hesitate. She pushed open the door to find exactly what she'd feared. Luisa backed against the ice machine, her eyes wide with fear, as a man in an expensive but rumpled suit leaned over her, waving what looked like a $100 bill. "Excuse me," Zora said loudly, making both of them turn. "Luisa, Mrs. Pearson is looking for you downstairs." Something about the linens for the bridal suite. It was a lie, but it gave Louisa the opening she needed. The younger woman slipped quickly, past the man, whispering a thank you to Zora as she hurried out. The man's bloodshot eyes now focused on Zora, his expression shifting from confusion to annoyance. "What did you do that for? We were just talking." "Sir, if you need ice, I'd be happy to get it for your room," Zora said professionally, though her heart was pounding. He took a step closer, and she could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Maybe. You want to talk instead? You're prettier anyway." Zora took a step back. "Sir, I need to finish my rounds. If you'll excuse me." "Don't be like that," he said, reaching for her arm. "I'm paying good money to stay in this hotel. Least you could do is be friendly." Zora pulled her arm away, her mind racing. The ice room was tucked in an alcove off the main hallway. No one would see them here. Should she scream? Call for help? Would that get her fired? Before she could decide, a calm voice came from the doorway. "Everything okay in here?" Zora and the drunk man both turned to see Thomas standing there, his expression neutral, but his eyes sharp and assessing. "Mind your own business, buddy," the drunk man said, turning back to Zora. "Me and the maid here were just getting acquainted." "Actually," Thomas said, stepping fully into the room, "the hotel has a strict policy against harassing staff members. I'm going to have to ask you to return to your room, sir." The drunk man squinted at Thomas, trying to place him. "Who the hell are you? Hotel security or something?" "Something like that," Thomas replied evenly. Maybe it was his tone, or the quiet authority in his stance, but something sobered the drunk man momentarily. He looked between Thomas and Zora, then threw up his hands. "Whatever. She's not that pretty anyway." He pushed past Thomas, stumbling slightly as he disappeared down the hallway. Zora let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. "Thank you, sir. I wasn't sure what to do." Thomas watched the hallway for a moment longer, as if making sure the man was truly gone, then turned to Zora. "Are you all right?" She nodded, though her hands were still shaking slightly. "Yes, I'm fine. He just caught me off guard." "Do you know his room number?" Thomas asked. 11 and 27, I think. "He's with the Miller wedding." Thomas nodded, pulling out his phone and typing something quickly. "Don't worry about him anymore, he won't be a problem." The confidence in his voice made Zora wonder again who exactly this man was. Just a guest who happened to be in the right place at the right time? Or something more? "How did you know?" she asked. "That something was wrong, I mean." "I was coming back to my room when I saw the younger housekeeper, Louisa you called her, practically running down the hallway. She looked scared. Then I heard voices." He shrugged. "Wasn't hard to put together." Zora nodded, still trying to steady her breathing. "Well, thank you again. Most guests wouldn't have gotten involved." "I'm not most guests," he said simply. Then, with a small smile, "Need help finishing your rounds? I don't mind playing bodyguard for a while." The offer was so unexpected that Zora almost laughed. "That's very kind, but I don't think Mrs. Pearson would approve of a guest helping with turn-down service." "Probably not," he agreed, his eyes crinkling with humor, "though I bet I could fold a mean hospital corner if given the chance." This time Zora did laugh, the tension of the moment finally breaking. "I appreciate the offer, but I'll be fine. That guy was just a jerk." Thomas nodded, his expression turning serious again. "Unfortunately, there are plenty of those in the world. But remember, you don't have to tolerate that kind of behavior, not even from guests. The hotel should have your back on that." "Should," Zora repeated quietly, thinking of Mrs. Pearson's constant reminders about guest satisfaction and invisible service. Thomas seemed to read her thoughts. "If anyone gives you trouble about what happened here, anyone at all, let me know. Room 1217. With that, he gave her a small nod and walked away, leaving Zora staring after him in confusion and growing curiosity. Who was this man who stayed in the best suite in the hotel, intervened to protect staff members, and seemed to know exactly what to say to make her feel better? One thing was becoming clear. Thomas was no ordinary guest, and Zora was determined to find out exactly who he was The Monday after the chaotic weekend, the Harrington Hotel settled back into its normal rhythm. The tech conference attendees had checked out en masse Sunday afternoon, leaving behind empty coffee cups and scattered charging cables. The wedding party had departed in a flurry of white garment bags and gift boxes. Now the hotel felt almost eerily quiet by comparison. Zora welcomed the calm as she went about her usual routine. Her encounter with the drunk guest, and Thomas's unexpected intervention, had left her with questions that nagged at her like an itch she couldn't scratch. There was something about him, something that didn't quite add up. Regular guests, even wealthy ones who stayed in expensive suites, didn't usually know hotel policies about staff harassment or speak with such authority to other guests. "Earth to Zora," Darlene's voice broke through her thoughts as they sat in the staff break room. "You gonna eat that yogurt or just keep stabbing it to death?" Zora looked down at her lunch, realizing she'd been mindlessly stirring her yogurt while lost in thought. "Sorry," she said, putting down her spoon. "Just thinking." "About what? Or should I say about who?" Darlene wiggled her eyebrows suggestively. "You got that faraway look again." Zora rolled her eyes but couldn't help smiling. "It's not like that. I'm just curious about something." "Spill it," Darlene insisted, leaning forward over her sandwich. "After the weekend we just had, I need some good gossip." Zora glanced around. The break room. A few housekeeping staff sat at the other tables along with some kitchen workers on their lunch break. No sign of Mrs. Pearson, thankfully. "It's about the guy in 12-17, Zora said, lowering her voice. "There's something weird about him." Darlene's eyes widened. "Weird how? Like, creepy weird?" No, Zora shook her head quickly. "Not creepy at all. Actually, he's really nice. Too nice, almost." "Too nice?" Darlene looked skeptical. "That's your complaint?" Zora sighed, struggling to put her feelings into words. "It's not a complaint, it's just, he doesn't act like the other guests. He remembers my name. He asks me questions about myself. And Saturday night he stepped in when that drunk wedding guest was harassing me and Louisa." "He did?" Darlene's eyebrows shot up. "Okay, that is unusual. Most guests wouldn't get involved in something like that." "Exactly. And he said something like, the hotel has a strict policy against harassing staff members." "How would he know that?" Unless he works here?" Darlene finished, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe," Zora said. "But then why would he be staying in the corner suite? And I saw a notebook in his room with staff observations written at the top." Darlene's eyes grew even wider. "Wait, you think he's like undercover management or something? Checking up? On us?" The idea had crossed Zora's mind. "Maybe. Or a hotel critic. Someone writing a review." Darlene shook her head, a strange expression crossing her face. "Girl, you really don't know, do you?" "Know what?" Before Darlene could answer, the break room door swung open and Mrs. Pearson walked in. The supervisor's sharp eyes scanned the room before landing on their table. "Williams Jones," she acknowledged with a curt nod. "Break's over in 5 minutes." "Yes, Mrs. Pearson," they answered in unison. As the supervisor moved to the coffee machine, Darlene leaned across the table and whispered, "Meet me by the service elevator after shift. There's something you should know." The afternoon dragged by as Zora cleaned room after room, her mind buzzing with possibilities. What did Darlene know that she didn't? Was Thomas some kind of celebrity staying incognito? A hotel inspector? A travel writer for a fancy magazine? By the time her shift ended at 4 o'clock, Zora was nearly bursting with curiosity. She hurried through her end-of-day checklist and made her way to the service elevator where Darlene was already waiting, bouncing slightly on the balls of her feet. "Finally," Darlene said, grabbing Zora's arm and pulling her into the small staff locker room nearby. She checked to make sure they were alone before turning to Zora with an expression of disbelief. "I can't believe you don't know who he is," Darlene said, shaking her head. "Though I guess that's the point." Who is?" Zora asked, exasperation creeping into her voice. Would you please just tell me? Darlene took a deep breath. The guy in 1217. His name is Thomas Harrington. Zora stared at her cousin blankly. Okay? Harrington. As in Harrington Hotels. Darlene raised her eyebrows meaningfully. When Zora still looked confused, Darlene threw up her hands. Girl, he owns this place. The whole hotel chain, actually. His grandfather founded it and he took over as CEO last year. The words hit Zora like a bucket of ice water. Thomas owned the hotel? The whole chain? She thought back to their interactions. Her entering his room while he was there, their casual conversations about coffee shops, the time he'd stepped in with the drunk guest. All along she'd been speaking to her boss's boss's boss without even knowing it. That's not possible, Zora stammered. Though even as she said it, pieces started falling into place. The special instructions for his room, the way staff and management treated him, the notebook with staff observations. It's definitely possible, because it's true, Darlene insisted. He stays at different Harrington properties every few months, goes undercover, kind of. Not completely, the management knows who he is, obviously. But he doesn't announce himself to the staff. Likes to see how the hotels really run when people aren't putting on a show for the big boss. Zora felt her face grow hot with embarrassment. All this time, she'd been treating the owner of the entire hotel chain like a regular guest. A nice one, but still just a guest. How do you know all this? She asked Darlene. Been here 3 years, remember? He's done this before. Last time he stayed on the 8th floor, not in the corner suite. I recognized him from a picture in Mr. Reynolds' office. There's a whole wall of Harrington family photos in there. Zora sank onto a bench, her mind reeling. So when I walked in on him in his room that first day, yep, that was the big boss. And when I recommended that coffee shop, giving the CEO of Harrington Hotels local tips. Darlene couldn't contain her amusement any longer and burst into laughter. Only you, cuz, only you. But Zora wasn't laughing. A horrible thought had just occurred to her. Oh no. What if he thinks I was snooping? I saw that notebook on his desk. What if he fires me? Darlene's laughter subsided. If he was going to fire you, he'd have done it already. Besides, from what you've told me, he seems to like you. Or he's just gathering evidence before he lets me go, Zora groaned, burying her face in her hands. Stop being dramatic. Look on the bright side. You made a good impression on the biggest big boss without even trying. That's got to count for something. Zora wasn't convinced. What am I supposed to do now? How do I act around him? Same as before, Darlene shrugged. He obviously doesn't want special treatment from the staff or he'd have announced who he was. Just keep doing your job. And maybe, she added with a mischievous smile, keep being Zora from Mississippi. Seems like that's working for you. Despite Darlene's advice, Zora felt anything but normal as she arrived at work the next morning. Every time she passed a manager in the hallway, she wondered if they were talking about her. Was that why Mr. Reynolds, the general manager, had given her that strange look in the lobby? Had Thomas reported her for some mistake she didn't even know she'd made? By mid-morning, she was a bundle of nerves as she pushed her cart toward the 12th floor. Room 1217 was on her cleaning schedule as usual. But now, knowing who really occupied that corner suite, the thought of entering it made her palms sweat. Just do your job, she muttered to herself as she reached the door. Nothing's changed, except everything had changed. She wasn't cleaning a regular guest room anymore. She was cleaning the CEO's suite. Excellence in every detail, as Mrs. Pearson would say. Zora knocked on the door with more force than necessary. Housekeeping. No answer, as expected. Thomas. Mr. Harrington, she corrected herself mentally. Usually left by 9 in the morning. Probably for important CEO meetings where he decided the fates of housekeepers who entered his room without permission. She used her key card and pushed. The door opened slowly, half expecting to find him sitting there waiting to confront her. But the suite was empty. Zora let out a breath and got to work, cleaning with more thoroughness than she'd ever shown before. She arranged the bathroom amenities at perfect right angles. She made hospital corners on the bed that would have made Mrs. Pearson proud. She dusted surfaces that didn't even look dusty. As she was finishing up, her eye caught something on the desk, another note, this one folded and propped against the lamp. And it had her name on it. Zora froze. Should she read it? Was it even for her, or was there another Zora on staff she didn't know about? With trembling fingers, she picked up the note and unfolded it. Zora, thank you for the coffee shop recommendation. Grounded was exactly what I needed. Quiet, good Wi-Fi, and the best almond croissant I've had outside of Paris. If you have other local suggestions, I'm all ears. TH. She read the note 3 times, trying to decipher any hidden meaning. Was this a test, some kind of trap? But the words seemed genuine, just like their previous interactions had felt genuine. Zora carefully folded the note and put it in her pocket, her mind spinning with confusion. If Thomas Harrington was just evaluating staff performance, why leave her a personal thank you note? Why chat with her about Mississippi? Why step in when that guest was causing trouble? Unless, maybe he really was just being nice. The thought was almost more unsettling than the idea that he was secretly evaluating her. In Zora's experience, people with power, especially the kind of power that came with owning a national hotel chain, didn't go out of their way to be kind to housekeepers. They didn't remember where you were from or ask about your day or leave thank you notes for simple recommendations. Yet Thomas Harrington had done all those things, and he'd done them before she knew who he was. Before she had any reason to treat him differently than any other guest. As she pushed her cart back into the hallway, Zora made a decision. She would keep doing her job exactly as she had been. If Thomas Harrington wanted to fire her for some unknown transgression, so be it. But she wouldn't change how she acted around him just because of his title. After all, he'd been the one to hide who he really was. And in Zora's book, a person's actions said more about them than their name, even if that name happened to be on the side of the building.